Say, Phil.
Good afternoon, JR.
How you
It's a
doing, bud?
beautiful day.
Yes, it's warmer.
Got some nice rain.
I guess winter's over.
I doubt it.
I
It's
do
a little,
too.
It's a little early to make that call.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
But it's been a good week.
Yeah.
Thankful
You know
for
what the
the-
weather forecast last night said? 68 next Wednesday.
It might be over.
Might be 70 next week.
When it might be over. Jay, we're still talking about our attitude in worship today. We're looking in Psalm 40 again. Looking at some scriptures that's got some messianic elements to it.
Right, right.
Some things between King Saul and Samuel. Of course, this song, we don't know where it was at in David's career, but it's could be any number of places.
Mhm.
We're constantly barraged by people that want our attention. They want attention to those things which they think are important. And that's not to say they're not important, but sometimes they aren't as important to us as maybe to them.
Right, right.
This particular set of scriptures, family, work responsibilities, those things will certainly get our attention. But our attention to those things shouldn't ever override our focus on God.
Mhm.
It's easy to get distracted in this world. Get all hyped up in kids' activities and get distracted from what we should be doing. When we keep our hearts and our minds focused on Him, we can address the other things that come up in our life that we should be. This verse 6 today, chapter 40, verse 6, reflects the incident between King Saul and Samuel. It's 1 Samuel 15:22. So this song could have been early in David's career when he was still fleeing from King Saul,
Yeah.
but certainly got messianic elements to it. We know that the choir director was the leader who was responsible for keeping the hymn collection, led the people in worship, and when they sang, led them in song. Writer of study talked about the Summer Olympic Games in Berlin in 1936, said the torch relay, otherwise, it used to be known as carrying the flame. It had been a tradition, and the flame originates in Greece, the birthplace of the Olympics, and then it makes its way to the host city, wherever that is. And that same flame is used to light the Olympic torch at the opening ceremony. Well, when one torch lights another torch, it's called the kiss. Well, that kiss is the secret to moving the flame forward. And they say each torch only burned for 15 minutes.
I didn't realize that.
I didn't either.
I didn't have a clue. I thought it would burn hours maybe.
Yeah, but
Wow.
they said that's why it's important that the torch bearers
Yeah.
don't lose focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Their objective is to advance the flame, and the God that created us, He has a purpose for us. He wants to use us and use our lives to impact His kingdom, to make impacts on others through His Spirit. Let's look at the scriptures
You're looking
for
at
today.
41 through 5 to start with him. As you've already said, life was full of distractions. He was either running from enemies or fighting for his life, or when he wasn't doing that, he was concerned about the sins he committed.
He had a full life.
He had a full, and being the king on top of all that. But during all those times, David, as we should, kept his eyes focused on God. And let's read what these verses have to say about that. He says, this is David talking, I waited patiently on the Lord, and He turned to me and heard my cry for help. He brought me up out of a desolate pit, out of the muddy clay, and set my feet on a rock, making my steps secure. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see and fear, and they will trust in the Lord. How happy is anyone who has put his trust in the Lord and is not turned to the proud or to those who run after lies. Now, Phil, he starts a prayer for the rest of these verses of prayer to God. He says, Lord my God, you have done many things, your wondrous works and your plans for us. None can compare with you. If I were to report and speak of them, there are more than could be told. So David starts his verse out, this psalm out, by saying, I waited patiently on the Lord. As we said, David was always in a desperate, it seems like he was in a desperate situation. But he waited patiently on the Lord. Now the question is, do we give God a time to respond when we ask him for something? And the answer a lot of times is, we get pretty impatient, don't we?
No, we don't.
We ask God to help us, and then we start making plans of how we're going to do what we're going to do, and we're probably going to do to start with. But David was patient, and I think as we get older, we get more patient too in our interaction with God. But a lot of times we're not. David says, God turned to me and heard my cry. By talking about a cry, David's telling us he was in a bad place.
Yeah.
We've all been in places where there wasn't anything to do but cry or call on God, and that's where David was. Then he says, he brought me up out of a desolate pit, out of the muddy clay. As you talked about, we're not sure exactly what the circumstances were, but David was his feelings were probably depression, darkness. He felt like he was in the dark, and a helplessness that we've all felt at some time in our life. But David goes on to say, he set my feet on a rock, making my steps secure. God took him from that place of darkness, of helplessness, of depression, and moved him to a place where David felt secure. Now, the situation around him might not have changed, but he felt secure because God was with him, and he could feel God's presence in his life. And he set him on solid ground. David felt like he would be able to move forward at this point in time rather than being in the place he was. David says, God put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. He looked at the situation totally different than he was before. This new song probably was a song of deliverance. God has helped me. And of course, there's now hymns that talk about a new song and have been written. And we've all been to that situation where we feel God helping us and our attitude changes. He said, David said that what God did for him, that many will see that and fear God because of what what God did in David's life. He's going to go on in some of the other verses and talk more about that, but people could tell David's attitude had changed, his situation had changed. And they would trust and believe in God because what they had seen in David's life. How happy is anyone who puts their trust in the Lord and has not turned to the proud or those who run after lies. The writer seems to talk about that. Could be several things, but it probably was the idols, the false gods or idols, or even dependent on ourselves rather than God. But when we put our trust in God, that's when we start getting better. So that's when our situation changes.
Yeah, we trust in the relationship that we have with him. Yeah.
David, I think what David was saying is that there's no help or deliverance to in anything other than trusting in God.
Yeah.
That's what he was saying. Whether it's false gods or idols or other people or ourselves, there's no deliverance except when we turn and put our trust fully in God. Yeah. David now begins his prayer in verse 5. He says, Lord my God, you have done many things, your wondrous works and your plans for us. And he says, they're so plentiful They can't even be told. I cannot, if I wrote down from now on what you've done for me, I would never get it all written down. I wouldn't have, my lifetime would be full of just writing down what you've done for
Yeah.
me. God had rescued and delivered David so many times that he couldn't tell them all.
And you know, it's that way with most of us. We
Yes.
count our blessings.
Yes.
Way, I mean,
Start counting your
we fall
blessings.
asleep.
You don't make
So,
it through it, do you?
That's a good way to fall asleep.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and of course, the Bible tells us that in the New Testament that if all the things that Jesus did in his life while he was here, books wouldn't hold it all. You couldn't all be written down. We know from these verses that David waited on the Lord, he displaying his trust in him. And then, after God responded, he praised him for his faithfulness and his love. And even all of Israel would praise God because of what he'd done for them. His life of trust in God brought great joy to himself, but it also brought great joys to others because he was not afraid to tell everyone what God had done for him. So if we could just live a life like David in that case, where we asked God, waited patiently for him, and then whenever he responded, show it to other people in the way we live and by telling them what he's done.
It's funny, he started out talking about how he brought him up out of that desolate pit.
Yeah.
He's talking about the muddy clay. I don't know if you've ever waded in clay in
Yes.
the bottom of the old muddy pond, but that's pretty mucky, isn't it?
I can remember around the cattle lots in the
all
wintertime
you
when
can
it
do
would
to
rain.
get out of it.
Yeah, when it rained in the wintertime, you just walk in there and your feet would get stuck in it.
Yeah.
The worst clay I've been in is Nebraska has a glue-like clay. It's gray.
Yeah.
Man, oh man, you can't walk across it. It gets stuck on your shoe. And the next thing you know, your shoe's that wide. The clay stuck on it.
It's, when David's talking here, he talks about the things that the Lord does and getting him out of that pit and how it, how long it would take if he could count them all up.
Yeah.
And then he shifts the focus now to obedience,
Right.
and what obedience means in our relationship with God. He says, you do not delight in sacrifice and offering. You open my ears to listen. You do not ask for a whole burnt offering or a sin offering. Then I said, see, I've come in. The scroll, it is written about me. I delight to do your will, my God, and your instruction is deep within me. So David was committed to obedience until he wasn't.
Right, right.
And about like all of us.
Yes.
Sometimes we find joy in doing God's will. Sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
And it's at those times that we need to be disciplined. We all need to be. And David was committed to obedience. He talked about God not wanting sacrifice. Well, he doesn't, because his commitment, his ordinances, his laws, they're not heavy on us.
Mm-hmm.
So, we should be able to bear those things out. And, God deserves our obedience, even then when it gets tough.
Yeah.
Even a sacrificial obedience. Sometimes it's incumbent upon us to go the extra mile, to reach someone or to make an impression on someone about their relationship with God. We should be stirred to do that, to keep that obedience, and not just going through a bunch of ritual performances like they did in the old days there with the Jewish church. I liken, when I think of rituals, I think a lot about the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
How they're up and down. And this is not a knock on them, but it's just, there's a lot of rituals there, that most churches don't have. David used a couple of different terms there, talking about the sacrificial system. The first two, sacrifice, that refers to the slain animals that they bring for their Thanksgiving offering. So whenever an Israelite brought sacrifice to the Lord, it was to be accompanied with praise, the sacrifice of praise. And accompanied their sacrifice was dedication. Dedication to do God's will. And it's called a dedication offering. It usually referred to a grain offering of some type. He says, look here, help me focus. Open my ears to listen. Well, we do that to our kids sometimes, don't
Yeah,
we?
yeah.
Would you clean your ears
Yeah,
and
that's
just listen
exactly
to
right.
me?
Put the phone down and
Yeah.
listen.
It doesn't necessarily, he's not necessarily talking about the ears here too. He could be talking
Yeah.
about the heart.
Oh, yeah,
Open
yeah,
your
oh, yeah.
heart.
It's more
Receive
likely.
God's message. Here, open your ears. He talks about God doesn't ask, doesn't request about the animals. God had a bunch of animals.
Yeah.
He owned all of them.
Yeah,
What's the
yeah.
Bible said? He owned the cattle on 1,000 hills.
Yeah.
So, he already owned all of them. Created them. He didn't need the animals. He didn't need those sacrifices to be. He needed their obedience. The
Dedication,
same
yeah.
way today.
Mhm.
Same way today. So the whole burnt offering was to atone for personal sins and also national sins as well.
Yeah.
They offered those up on behalf of the whole nation of Israel. And it symbolized total dedication to worshiping the Lord. Sin offering was for intentional sin and unintentional sin. There's times when we make mistakes, when we think, oh, I should have kept my mouth shut. And, it wasn't intentional. And then there's other times saying, oh, God won't
I'll get
mind
that.
if I just do this. And
Yeah.
we know it's wrong in
Yeah.
our heart. But these offerings were meant to be a reconciliation. It says, then I said, see, I have come. The response here is coming into the presence of a superior, the superior one, and expressed his willingness to be responsive to the call of God.
Yeah.
And go in and meet with him, make his commitment. David was going into the Lord's presence, into the sanctuary, and his intention, and what is it they say about good intentions? But his intentions were always to do the Lord's will.
Mhm.
But sometimes he, like us, we lose our focus, and we start doing things in our own mind that might be right or that may be skewed to our advantage. But anyway, this psalm, it says that it was written about me, meaning David. It could be prescribed to me, laid out for me, laid upon me. It could have been meaning it was written by me. Worshippers writing out their praise and their account of God's deliverance and depositing all that in a place of worship. The Jews still do this today at the Wailing Wall. You go out there and you see them bouncing up and down, and their little curls flowing up on the side of their head. But David talks about his delight. It was David's delight to do your will and your instruction. There's nothing like knowing that you gotten a hit in baseball. And there's nothing like knowing that you got a hit when you were at the right place at the right time, delivering what you know God put you there
wants you to do.
for.
Yeah.
There's not another feeling like it.
No.
And this is what the Lord approves of.
If you was talking about the Wailing Wall, the cracks in the Wailing Wall are full of little notes. People written and stuck in
Is
there.
that right?
Yeah, I walked up to it and seen them. It's just covered with, of course, it's got cracks all over, but pieces of paper stuck in there.
Thousands of years
Yeah.
of prayers
Yeah.
right there. And
Yeah.
you got to know what God's will is to carry it out. You say, well, how do you do that? well, you study His Word, you pray, and God will lead you in the direction that you should go. God won't go against His Word. Sometimes it's a Christian that might be giving you advice from something and an experience that they had or something. But we get these instructions in a variety of ways, but always with prayer, the Spirit moves. And David says, it's deep within me. The Lord's instruction was deep within him. So it wasn't only written on the scroll, but on David's heart as well.
Yeah.
His inner being, the bowels, the entrails, it's deep within me. That's what they talked about. So he not only heard the Lord's instruction, but he placed it deep in himself. How do you describe somebody that delights in doing God's will? We know that David did, and for the most part did that.
I know how I feel whenever I do it. Whenever God, as you said, puts us in a position to say something or do something for somebody, it makes you feel good all over. It makes you feel, as David said, deep down inside. It's not just a I'm happy on the outside, or it's that feeling you get to knowing that you're doing what God wants you to do.
You know, I liken it to that. It's like a fresh, cool breeze after you've run a mile.
Yeah, there you go.
You know,
there
and you get in that extra air, and you get that little boost. You get that. Sometimes it's an enormous boost that you get when you're doing God's will, and somebody that delights in that, you'll see it over and over.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing you see, consistency in doing that. The benefits are obvious when we do God's will. It moves people to action because God moves through us. And so therefore we might not see it, but at some point in that person's life, God will move through that person that you've touched.
Yeah, yeah.
And they may recall, yeah, I remember talking to old JR. You know, and these are things truths that he shared with me. Yeah. In these next verses, David, like David, we were to be unashamed of our worship.
Yeah. So what did David do with this action? Well, after God helped him through the situation, what does David do about it? Does he go over and sit in the corner and not do anything? Let's see what it says he did here in verses 9 through 11. I proclaim righteousness in the great assembly. See, I do not keep my mouth closed. As you know, Lord, I did not hide your righteousness in my heart. I spoke about your faithfulness and salvation. I did not conceal your constant love and truth from the great assembly. Lord, you do not withhold your compassion from me. Your constant love and truth will always guard me. David now says that I proclaim your righteousness in the great assembly. And he but of course David was always in the crowd of people and always the main person in the assembly. So he had a great opportunity to do what he says he did here, that he praised God publicly for the things that God had done for him throughout his life. He was as the writer says, he goes on to say, I will not keep my mouth closed. As you know, Lord, you know what I've done. You know I have proclaimed what you've done. The writer talks like he says he was no coward when it came to making a public testimony about what the Lord had done in his life. He was proud of it. He was proud of the compassion that God had for him, thankful for the compassion, the love that God has shown toward him.
I remember how he acted when he came in from his first battle. That's Saul. He and Saul had together defeated I don't remember if it was Amalekites or Philistines, one or the other.
Yeah.
And they come in from this great victory. And David, what was it they were saying? Saul saying his thousands, David is 10,000.
10,000.
But he had stripped down to his loincloth and was dancing in the street, wasn't he?
Well, Miriam's one said, you don't need to be doing that, right?
Yeah, Saul's daughter said, you don't need to be running around out here half naked.
But he was
He was expressing that
his joy.
inner joy.
That God,
That
God had delivered
had
them
delivered
and the nation of Israel, not even him, but the nation of
Yeah.
Israel from his enemy. He says, Lord, you know it. You know that David had confidence that God was watching him and knew what he'd done. And do we always think God sees us? And the answer is yes, we should, because God knows what we do. When we do, especially when we do His, well, He knows what we do all the time, but He's proud of us when we do His will. And we can be assured that He knows it, He recognizes it. But David said, I know you know what I've done. He said, I did not hide your righteousness in my heart. God had done so much for David that David could not keep from telling people about it. He said, I spoke about your faithfulness and your salvation. And I also did not conceal your constant love and truth. You did not withhold compassion and your constant truth and love from me. God will always show us. God is compassionate. We know that. He's compassionate. He's patient with us. Sometimes we're not patient with Him, but He's patient with us. But He doesn't withhold His compassion. Now, there's times when He chastises us, and that compassion might be, well, you need to be punished a little bit for this, but He still, that compassion is always there. He does it. Why does God punish us sometimes or chastise us sometimes?
It's because He loves us.
Because
Same
He
way
loves us,
we do
because
our
He,
children.
because of the compassion He has for us, the love He has for us. He says, you will always guard me. I think what David's saying there is, you're going to always preserve me and keep me safe. You have from my very early life, childhood, when I was killing bears and lions, with protecting the flock, even up till today, and you will always do that. We can see from these verses that David had a very intimate relationship with God.
Yeah.
And when God says He's a man after my own heart, when God says that, we know that that relationship was wonderful between the two. He came to worship God when he was in the assembly, not just watch it being done by others.
Yeah. Involved
in the worship.
Personally involved.
Yes. He was. We have a few people that raise their hands up, which is great. He was one of those raising his hand, maybe even dancing in the aisle at times when he was worshiping God. He didn't just come to worship; to watch other people worship. All believers have a private aspect in their relationship with God. We need a private relationship with God, but we also need that corporate worship, that corporate relationship with God for ourselves, and that other people can see us. Not that we're showing off, but that they can see us worshiping, and we can all worship together and praise this. God is so great that He can be compassionate, have a compassionate love for everyone. He says, the writer says, but a healthy believer has a corporate relationship with God in worship that's expressed in concert with the rest of the body of believers. It's great on Sunday morning when we stand up and start singing, and I love to look around and see how people are reacting. And we have people that don't sing. We have people that do sing. We have people that sing too loud, which is, I'm one of those. But what I like to look at are visitors we have. When we have a couple come in, or one person, it doesn't matter. You can tell as soon as the singing starts whether or not they have been in church before.
Yeah.
Most of them will sing, or they'll at least nod with a tune or something. And you can tell they've been in church before. They know what's going on, and that's good to see when that happens. David was bold in his proclamation and display of worship, and his focus remained on God through the entire time. Not on himself, but on God and what God had done for him, and he praised God for it constantly.
Jay, I liked what they said there about a healthy believer.
Yeah.
A healthy believer has a corporate relationship with God in worship. And it's expressed in concert with the rest of the body.
Right.
It tells well, be spurred to join others, other Christians.
Could you, and the answer is yes, we can for sure, but wouldn't it be difficult to just worship by yourself
Oh.
day after day and week after week and not have any interaction with other Christians?
I could do it,
Yeah, yeah,
but why would I?
oh, yeah, exactly.
Because the blessings that you get from worship with other people
Yeah,
is reaffirming. It builds you up.
yeah,
When you see it, act on people's lives. Jay, you and I, we've both been through prostate cancer. And I don't know what your year date was, but it's 2016 for me. And November 1st,
about
2016.
2020, something like that.
Back it up.
Yeah,
They say, well, maybe 5 years.
yeah.
Folks, that's 2016. This is 2025. So I'm 9 years in on a 5-year sentence.
Yeah, yeah,
God is good, and He acts in our lives. He acts on behalf of us. And when we come in and we share that with other people, just like sharing that, it should build other people up.
yeah.
It's not for me. I mean, He's doing it
Yeah,
for me,
right.
but it builds up the body when you come in and you worship with other Christians. And it just helps us to focus on Him and Him alone, and what He's doing in different people's lives. And not only that, Jay, you go and you see this friend, and maybe he's got an illness or some kind of thing or disability, and you say, well, your friends be able to recant the story, the witness. I remember Brenda for what?
Yeah,
14 years,
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
that. She fought this thing. And remarkable witness. Just
no, how many times did she get up, did she
how many
lift all
times
of us up?
she lifted us up.
Yeah, yeah,
and,
and we
you
thought
know,
we were
she-
trying to help her, but she was lifting us up every Sunday.
There's days her encouragement to me, and I'm sure to you, carried us.
Yeah, yeah,
Carried us. So it's important. And like David said, he wouldn't be silent. He's going to go in shouting the things that God had done. So as we obey the God of creation, as we do things we know God has put before us to do, whether we're doing them, if we're doing them begrudgingly, we're not going to get nothing
no,
out of that.
no.
But if we do it with delight and joy in our heart,
It's what a
if you're
blessing.
not, if you're not getting that, ask God to help you obey Him with joy. It's easy to get in a ditch, get discouraged. So what's weighing heavy on your heart? Ask God for His help each morning this week. Don't try to fix the situation. Rely on Him. Don't try to provide a solution. Rely on Him. Thank God when He provides that for you. David said, I'll wait patiently on Him. Worship the Lord. God puts a song in the mouths of those He loves, and He'll put that witness to you. Share it with someone else. We've enjoyed this study. I hope you have. Hope you all can join us next week as we look more at focusing on our worship.
The benefits of worship. What do we get out of worship? It's another book out of Psalms. I'm sure it'll be a good one.
It will.
Phil, we talk about singing in church. Stay in the nursery one Sunday and get those 4 and 5 year olds to tell you what songs they want to sing, and they'll each one of them have a song, and they just stand there and sing them just like they were the greatest singer. I love that, Phil. I could do that for hours at a time, a lot longer than they could stand to sing. That's what we get out of the worship.
Yeah.
You get just as much worship out of those little nursery kids as you do in the sanctuary.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us.